Today I'm joined by Grace Gudenkauf and Amelia McGee, co-founders of Women Invest in Real Estate and authors of The Self-Managing Landlord on Bigger Pockets. Grace and Amelia, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I know you've told this story a lot, but I think it's a good one. Can you talk about how you two met?
Yes, we always joke that I slid into Amelia's DMs. And actually, I was just reading through my journal that I had about 5 years ago when we started WIIRE. And it was so funny, but I was posting on social media about real estate investing because I didn't know anybody in my real life who did it. Then somebody either sent me Amelia or I saw her and I was like, oh my gosh, no way, there's another young gal doing this. This is crazy. We got to be friends. So I pull up to her inbox. I'm like, hey, I'm Grace. Like, we should be friends. Who are you? Blah, 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 blah. And then I basically asked her to be on this not yet created meetup so I could selfishly ask her like how she did everything. And then that became WIIRE, long story short, and it's been about 5 years.
That is amazing.
I've got nothing to add to that story other than we are also both in Iowa, so we had that in common as well, except we were 2 hours apart at the time. So like even crazier to find another younger woman in the same state as you doing the same thing as you. Like we just had so much to talk about. It was very quickly a close friendship.
That's awesome. It was meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Definitely.
How is the investing community in Iowa generally?
It's good, actually, I would say. I'm in Des Moines. I invest here in Des Moines, and then I also invest in a small town, which is my hometown in southern Iowa. But there's lots of local investor meetups. There's a local investor Facebook group that's very active. I don't know if Grace's market in Cedar Rapids is as active because it's not as big of a community as Des Moines. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here, a lot of investors that are networking with each other and holding each other accountable.
That's awesome. That's very cool. So what led to starting WIIRE? It sounded like, Grace, you already kind of had it in mind.
Well, I was, again, just reading through my journals and I kept writing, I want to have a women's meetup. I want to have a women's group. And it was because I wanted friends. It was a very selfish move to make myself be friends with other people doing the same thing because it was so lonely. So when Amelia and I did that first little Zoom, you know, it's 2020, 2021, everybody's Zooming everything because of COVID. Like 30 or 40 people showed up and we were like, whoa, what? I thought maybe 5 people would show up to this and I'd be excited. And one of them would have been my mom and one would have been Amelia's mom. And we would have been pumped. And so after that first meetup, I remember texting her and being like, that was really cool. Should we like do this every month? And never did we mean to make it a business, which I think makes the perfect business, right? When it's born out of a true necessity. And we just kept going and it's never stopped. And it grew to so many other things like the book, retreats, our boot camps, our community. And it has been an outlet for us to make so many incredible friends and connections.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that WIIRE is, like Grace was saying, it was really a selfish thing for us to create in a way because there's other groups out there. There's lots of investor groups. There's a few even that are specific to women, but none of them were exactly our vibe. So we were kind of like, let's just create our own. Let's do our own thing. We've got the millennial thing going on. We tell it how it is. We're super down to earth. Again, we're Midwestern girls, so we didn't grow up in flashy lifestyles, and I think that's really appealing to a lot of other investors out there. And also, we are not striving to own hundreds and hundreds of properties. We very much think there's a life outside of real estate and a life outside of working a W-2. So we invest in real estate as a means to an end so that we can live our life to our fullest.
That's great. I love that. And so you started it fully virtual, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what was it like the first time you actually were in person with people?
Okay, well, I also have that story. Amelia had been throwing around the idea of a retreat because that was like the first thing we did in person. And I was like, no, you're crazy. We can't ask these people off the internet to come hang out with us for a weekend. Nobody will show up. She was like, well, I already sent out an email and people already booked it. So like, we're having a retreat. And I was like, oh my God, okay, I guess we're doing this. and it sold out in like the first day. And that first set of retreat, we were like, oh my God, like, are people going to show up? And now we're planning our 10th. And so that was just magical. To take something offline and meet in person is just, you go 100 miles an hour, because it's like, I feel like I've known you forever, even though we've never met. And all of the women there are so grounded by the same core values and desires. So it's really magical.
That is so cool. I love that you just ripped the Band-Aid off, Amelia. You just sent that email.
Yeah, we usually move quickly when we have an idea. Grace usually actually is the one that moves quicker, but for some reason, I just knew that was going to be a success.
You made the decision for 2.
Yeah. The other thing that makes like meeting in person in our retreat so amazing is, like Grace was saying, you don't have to start from ground zero. You know, when you talk to people in your everyday life about real estate investing, they have no idea what you're talking about. They don't know what cash on cash return is. They don't even know what cash flow is. And so you have to explain the basics before you can even get into the good stuff. And when you're with other investors, you can skip all the prerequisites and just get into the juicy problem-solving details.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so your group, specifically being women investors, I imagine that was part of the appeal for a lot of people, of finding like-minded women who are investing. What are some of the unique challenges you've seen, some of your members facing?
That's a great question. And honestly, I feel like you would think we discuss this more than we actually do. But I think really what binds us all together is, yes, we're all women, but more importantly, we're all, like Amelia said, down to earth, just want to do it to live the lives that we want. But obviously, I come from a engineering background where I was the only girl in my office, and I was the only one like under 30 in my office. So I knew how it was to be uncomfortable and to have conversations where you're probably the person who knows the least in the room. So I think that can be a familiar setting for a lot of people in real estate. It obviously is a very male-dominated, older person-dominated industry. So it's also nice just to have an outlet to connect with people who know what that feels like.
One thing our members, we've seen over and over again, members within the WIIRE community, is they really like having someone to tell them the decisions they're making are okay or good. And I think that's very specific to women. Sorry, Jonathan, I know you're a guy, but women don't inherently, I think, have as much confidence in making decisions on their own, which, Grace and I have no problem with that. But, it's just...
Clearly, we make decisions very fastly.
we are quick about that, but, like, that's so common. Or they want to make sure, like, I'm not making the wrong decision. I think that's a big one, is, like, they want to make sure they're getting it right, and they want to have someone confirm that, like, yes, what you're doing is correct. It's okay to keep moving forward. So we see that a lot, and it's just great to have a community of women that can help guide, like, yeah, I've been through that. That's kind of the right track. Or, yeah, I've been through that. I think you should probably do it this way instead.
That is awesome. Yeah, I feel like that is the strength of the community, right? Whether you're a man or a woman, just knowing that, like,
yeah,
you're doing this correctly, you're not going to, especially when you're talking about real estate investing, it's a lot of money that you're putting into properties. And you hear tons of horror stories of somebody who bought the wrong property or got the wrong tenants and then screwed up their property or had a squatter situation. So yeah, just hearing from someone that, no, this makes sense. You're on the right path.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I always tell people is you wouldn't expect, a traditional business like a hospital or a grocery store or whatever, people running that, to run that in a silo where they don't ever talk to anybody else in their industry. They don't ever network. They don't ever tell anybody they have a business. So as real estate investors, why do so many of us do that? We keep it a secret. We're like, I'm too embarrassed to tell people that I do this. I don't want people to make fun of me, or I don't want people to not support me. And then they don't have anybody to talk to it about. And it's like, that's not what business owners do. Good business owners network with people, have a sounding board, can run ideas and bounce ideas off other people and get a big ROI from that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's that idea of landlord is a dirty word, right? Everyone jumps to slumlord, which obviously you two are not. So
no, we are very passionate about being good landlords.
Well, that's a great segue into your book. You wrote the book, The Self-Managing Landlord. Why did you decide to write a book?
Yeah, we're so passionate about it. We wrote a book about it. No, We had been in the Bigger Pockets sphere for a while. We'd done YouTube videos for them. We'd done some social media stuff here and there. And a while back, we kind of talked about possibly writing a book with them, but we just never could really land on a solid idea that we both felt passionate about. And about 2 years ago, they approached us and said, hey, we've got this great idea for a book we think you'd both be good at. So actually, we didn't even pitch them on this. They came to us because they knew we were both self-managers. And we were like, oh my gosh, we're so excited to hear what this topic's going to be. And then when we got on the phone with them and they were like, it's about how to self-manage, we were just like, wow, that is so uninspiring.
That's a dry topic.
What
sometimes.
a dry topic. Like, we were like, oh boy. But then we, changed it, and we were like, actually, I think we have a lot of good things to say about that. And so, I mean, we put it all in this book. It's like $20, I think. Probably one of the best investments you can make if you are going to be a self-manager. We walk through like how to set up your systems and processes, how to set up property management portal, just literally A to Z what you need to know to be a great landlord and to make the most money from your portfolio as possible.
But also from the perspective of you run a business, it's not a side hustle. How do we treat it as a business? What are the boundaries? What are the technologies you need, like TurboTenant? What are the systems you need to write out so that you can make as much money and be as good of a landlord as possible with the least amount of time and money invested? And I also want to point out that Bigger Pockets did have a really thick, like, tome of a book on self-managing, like 400 pages. And so I think they really wanted a fresh perspective and a different voice.
Yeah.
And I think we really delivered on that. And so you could write either, but I also, again, with the perspective of being a business owner, we love saying you're the CEO of your business, whether you realize it or not. You're the CEO, even if you're cleaning and you're the manager and the bookkeeper and the handyman, you're still the CEO. So that's a really great perspective that a lot of people don't even consider. And then they hear us talk or they read the book and it just changes their mindset.
I love that. That's great. Yeah, and we're actually co-hosting a webinar at the end of this month about be the CEO of your real estate business because, yeah, a lot of landlords don't even think of it as a business. And we get the question all the time, should I set up an LLC? And I feel like that is such a division with the audience of people being like, yes, of course you should. It's a business. And other people saying, huh? No, this is just a thing I do on the side.
Yeah.
Right. And even if you don't have an LLC, you can still treat it as a business even if it's in your personal name. There's just such a mom and pop mindset around being a landlord. And it's like, why? The person over here knitting scarves and selling them on Etsy treats their business more like a business than you who owns a portfolio of $1 million worth of properties. Like, it's just crazy.
Mm-hmm. And that's, again, why we're so passionate. Amelia hinted at us not being super excited about the topic at first when we heard about the book. But then when we really thought about it, we're like, no, we love talking about it from this perspective. So don't get us wrong. We are very passionate about it because we're able to teach so many things that people never think about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, one of the reasons I was so excited to talk with both of you is that we're very much aligned on the mission to fire your property manager. I listened to your recent podcast episode this morning of how to fire your property manager. I'd like to hear from you. Why do you prefer self-managing?
Oh my gosh. So many reasons. First of all, higher quality control. When you have a property manager, you cannot be their first priority because they have to have so many properties because they operate on razor thin margins. So you literally cannot be their priority. You're going to save a ton of money. You're also going to have more control. And if you ever had a property manager quit or leave or had to fire them, and then you just have no idea how to manage your properties, that's a really dangerous position to be in. Why would you buy hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of real estate and then just dump the management and care of the portfolio onto somebody else's doorstep? I think that's crazy. I know Amelia has a lot more to add too.
I was just speaking with another group yesterday, and we were talking about how to invest in small multifamily to then scale into larger multifamily. And I was talking about how one of the biggest benefits of being a great operator or a great self-manager is that you position yourself for future partnerships in such a good way, because money is the easy thing to find in real estate. Believe it or not, like, you can find money out there if you have good experience, and you can be a killer operator that has great properties that make you money, because other people want to give you their money and have you make them money as well. And when we were talking about that, so many people on the call were in the chat box saying, I'm firing my property manager. I just went through the process of firing them, or I'm ready to fire them. Like, I would say I've maybe talked to 5% of the people in the real estate world who have a property manager that they love. The other 95%, this is not an exaggeration, believe it or not, they either really don't like their property manager, or they're like, they're fine. They get by, but they're not great.
And what happens with the 5% who have a good property manager is those property managers get really popular because they do a great job. Well, then they start to hire a team and they start to manage a ton of properties. And what do you know? You're right back to square one, where they've got 250 properties to manage. You're the last priority. You can never get a hold of them, and you're no longer happy. I hired a full-time property and project manager on my payroll at one point, and before working with me, he was 20 years old, managing 300 properties for a company.
Making less than what you paid him to manage a portfolio.
And also making pretty much minimum wage.
That sounds miserable.
Yeah.
Oh, and then there's also the misconception that if you have a property management company, you don't have to do anything. And that's not true. You have to manage the property manager. Otherwise, again, they're not prioritizing your property. So then who is?
Mm-hmm.
More than likely, you have to still approve the tenant at the end of the day. You have to approve CapEx repairs and maintenance. If your property management company even handles that, sometimes they don't. Yeah, there's a lot of things that you have to manage. It is absolutely not set it and forget it. You have to do the management one way or the other. Might as well cut out the middleman, do a better job, hire somebody hourly to help you manage if you have a big enough portfolio, so you have that internal quality control, and do it that way. And you're going to be able to scale so much faster and keep so much more money in your pocket.
Yep, absolutely. There are so many landlords I've talked to that say, I ask if they use a property manager, just like you said. They'll say yes, and I hate them. Yes, I'm trying to fire them. Because they'll say that they don't do anything. They still come to the property owner for the actual okay. So, hey, there's an emergency maintenance request. What should I do about it? Like,
yeah,
you're supposed to take care of it. Stop calling me.
That's like the one thing that I want you to do is handle the emergencies, so then I'm not stressing out about it.
Absolutely.
And if landlords literally use TurboTenant or any other platform, that is like 85% of the battle. Automating all the things that TurboTenant can do will relieve 85% of the effort. Then it's just like finding the good tenant and making sure that you verify them, which also you can do on a platform. So don't try to fight this battle and mom and pop your way through it to save the $30 or $50 or whatever it is. Absolutely pay that, because you'll probably even get the ROI on just automating your late fees.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've run ads that just say fire your property manager.
Yeah.
Actually, so do we, and they perform really well.
We did have one get into the hands of the property manager audience, and they were not happy. They were really not happy, but they made the ads perform really well. And honestly, I've invited a lot of them. I replied, said, why don't you join this and come see why your clients are not happy with this industry? And I guarantee you, Amelia and I will have a lot of things to teach you about how to be a better property manager.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, what about remote landlords? Do you have any tips for remote landlords? Because that's the biggest objection we hear when we say fire your property manager. They'll say, I live in Colorado, I invest in Ohio, I have to have one.
Your number one thing, and probably about the only thing that really makes a difference, is finding your boots on the ground person that you trust. It could be a handyman, it could be another investor, it could be a family member, although I don't recommend that. It could
Realtor.
be an agent who's starting out and is willing to hustle for you for $20 an hour because their commission is few and far in between and they want to grow with you. That is really the key difference. And you need that person that you can say, hey, can you run to Menards or Home Depot and get this item for me? And they're going to do it. And you know how you're going to pay them. And they're happy to do all these favors because they're getting paid.
That's
Absolutely.
really all it is. It's finding a good boots on the ground. And we even have friends, and we talk about this in our book. One of our friends, Tian, she lives in California and she manages properties in Ohio. And she does virtual walkthroughs or FaceTimes over the phone. And she has keypad digital locks on all of her doors so she can access the property remotely and let people in and do showings that way. So she doesn't even need someone there to do showings, which is one of the biggest things that you need someone for. So like, if you have the time and you're willing to put in the work because you know that you're going to have a better quality product, you can absolutely manage from a distance.
And at worst case scenario, if you have to hire an agent or even a leasing company or leasing agent to just do that piece for you and then you self-manage, you're still going to be able to give way higher quality service to your tenant, save more money. And we all know, we say this over and over in the book, when you're a good landlord, you have happy tenants. And when you have happy tenants, they pay more rent and they stay longer, which puts more money in your pocket and causes you less stress. So it really does pay to be a good landlord.
Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, the realtor tip, that's a great one. Having boots on the ground. What are some of your other systems for self-management? How do we get success here?
We always talk about systems in the form of standard operating procedures, SOP. And I think that sounds really fancy, but most people, if you work a job, you probably have SOPs at your company. It might be called something different, but basically a procedure of how to do something. Somebody has to tell everybody what to do and how to do it. So I always tell people, even on your first property, keep a simple checklist of how you're renting it. Okay, I'm listing on Facebook and I'm listing on Zillow.com. Here are the requirements I put. 1 month's rent of security deposit. Pet rent is $50 a month. 600 minimum credit score. Write all your things down and then just keep track of what you're doing so that the next time you go through it, you just pull up that list and copy it. You don't have to sit down and refigure it out. And a lot of people are like, I only have one property. I don't need to write an SOP. Like, that's overkill. Well, I know plenty of landlords who have like literally one door. A tenant will be there for 5, 6, 7 years because they never raise the rent, which you should also not be the landlord who never raises your rent. And then when that tenant finally moves out, the landlord is like, oh my gosh, I have zero clue on how to do any of this because it was 8 years ago. I don't remember. Well, if you had just a little checklist you could pull up and copy that, you would save yourself of relearning how to lease a property every time. And the same goes for anything in your business. Bookkeeping, lending, buying the property, everything needs to have an SOP. They're living, breathing documents. You're not going to whip it out in one night, but just always use it as your source of truth and continually update it, and they will come to life and make a huge difference in your business.
And we've touched on this, but I can't harp on this enough, is to have a strong property management software. You would not believe the amount of landlords that we talk to who don't have this. And they're our age. They're technologically savvy. They could easily set this up, but they're still accepting rent via Venmo and direct deposit and all these other ways, which is creating so many more hours of work for them every single month. And I don't know why, if it's because they think it's going to be a lot of work to set the platform up, or if it's because they want to save the $50 a year or whatever it is to pay for a service. But it's just insane to me. It saves you so much time and makes you more money to just have everything automated.
And business boundaries are huge. Having business hours, when you have TurboTenant installed to where your tenants are sending maintenance requests to the app, they're not calling you. That reminds your tenant that, hey, this is a business. I can't call them at 10 o'clock at night on a Friday and think that they're going to answer over, hey, where is the extra garage door opener or whatever. And it also reminds people, I always tell people, if you get something come in on Saturday or Sunday, in TurboTenant, reply and say, hi, just got into my office, just seeing this. As a reminder, if you have an emergency over the weekend on non-business hours, here's the number, because of course you always want your tenants to be equipped to report emergencies and handle them. But it's telling people, oh, this is a business. Somebody's life does not revolve around me as the tenant. And it streamlines things. It makes it so much easier to say, sorry, we can't accept Venmo. Our business policy is that rent is accepted here and here. Or sorry, this is the late fee payment because this is our business policy. It's not just a single person making it up on the fly, even though it might be behind the scenes. We want to come off as professional.
Don't tell them that. That's okay.
Don't tell them that. They don't know. They have no idea. From my very first tenant, downloaded a property management software, made everybody onboard it, and I'd say, I'm the property manager. If they asked me if I was the owner, I would never lie. I would say, yeah, I'm the owner. But I'm not leading with that. I'm not leading with, you're the only tenant I have, and therefore you can run in circles around me. Yeah. I'm leading with, hey, I'm the property manager of Good Morning Investments. Here's our policy. Here's how we do things.
Because it creates a hierarchy, too, when you say, I'm the property manager instead of I'm the owner. Because then if they put you on the spot while you're at the property and say, hey, that fridge is white and I would prefer stainless steel or whatever, you can say, well, I'm going to have to talk to the owner about that instead of having to make an on-the-spot decision when you're face-to-face. Mm-hmm. So people are always like, is that ethical? And it's like, yeah, because technically you are the property manager. You literally are, but you're also the owner.
Or even simpler, you can always just say, I have to ask. You don't need to specify who. But the tenant is immediately assuming, oh, yeah, you have a boss. You have somebody you have to ask. Because you never want to be on the spot in any type of business setting, much less with tenants. And so it gives you that space, like you were saying, Amelia, to be like, let me think about this, let me ask, and I'll get back to you at a different time than right here in this instant.
Yeah, absolutely. Buy yourself some time to think about it. That's always huge. All right, well, do you have any tips for anyone who wants to get into their first deal in 2025?
First of all, buy box. If you go up to a realtor, because more than likely, if you're buying your first deal, you're probably going to buy in the market. And you're like, hey, I want to buy a house. They're going to be like, what? Okay, so does everybody else. If you're like, hey, I want to buy a duplex in this area in the next 90 days, and I'm pre-approved for $300,000. They're like, okay, we're talking. Let me work with this client. Let me pour some time and energy into making sure this client is successful. The other two things your buy box is going to do, it's going to prevent you from having shiny object syndrome, because you're going to get something come across your desk and you're going to go, nope, that's not my buy box. I'm not looking at it. Because that's also something a lot of newbies do, is they want to do everything and anything. And then the second thing it's going to do, it's going to prevent analysis paralysis, because when something comes and does check all the boxes on your buy box, you're kind of forced to take action. And then if you have to tell your realtor, oh, well, it meets everything, but I don't want it, you're just clearly not serious, or there's something else going on. And so it very much highlights, like, okay, you're not ready. Let's stop and reassess.
We just talked the other day about how we really think that deals like 1 through 3 are the hardest when you're just starting out, because there's so much fear behind the unknown. Like, okay, I'm going to buy this property, and then what do I do with it, and all the things that could go wrong. So we always talk about worst case scenario as well. So if the worst case scenario is you buy this single family home or this duplex, you still have your full-time job most likely. Hopefully you have a good financial background. If the property sits vacant for a few months or something goes horribly wrong, hopefully you have reserves that can cover it, or your full-time job can cover the payment on the property. Okay, so that's the worst case scenario. I'll have to maybe not go and get a massage every month and not go out to eat once a week because I've got this mortgage now that I have to cover. I'm okay with that. And if that's the worst case, then you move forward. So always put yourself in that scenario as well.
That's great advice. But how dare you say I should cancel my massage? I'm not doing that.
Well, I know that's a sacrifice I won't make either. But luckily for me, I'm not in that spot anymore. We also just had an amazing episode that we filmed on our podcast. That episode comes out at the beginning of March, and it's with an agent who works with beginner investors a lot. She just has so many great tips. So if you're like, I'm wanting to get started, go check out the WIIRE podcast on March 10th, because that episode will be out then, and it's a really, really good one.
Awesome. I'll check that out. Well, aside from that episode, what is next for WIIRE?
Oh.
So many
we're
things.
We're planning our 10th retreat. We've got our WIIRE community membership up and running, doing our second doors open launch of it. Been incredibly successful. What else, Amelia?
We also have a program called CEO Bootcamp. And if you're listening to this episode and you're like, yeah, I'm a mom and pop landlord, I need help. We talk about SOPs. We talk about getting organized. How do you do your bookkeeping? How do you really treat your business like a business and elevate yourself to that CEO position? So that's a very unique program. Again, I don't think a lot of people talk about the business aspect behind owning rental properties. And we're super, super passionate about that. So all of that stuff's on our website if you want to check us out. But those are a few things we have coming up.
And bookkeeping services. We just launched bookkeeping services for investors.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, that would be really helpful.
We like to fill the needs where we see it. And we see all the time investors that were like us who had death piles of receipts sitting around from 8 months ago and hadn't updated our books in 8 months. And they're unhappy with bookkeepers they've used in the past, or they just, don't want to do it themselves. So we created our own service. We have a bookkeeper who's got 30 years of experience on our team. So we're super, super pumped about that. And again, if your books aren't updated for 8 months, you have no idea how your properties are performing. You could be losing hundreds of dollars a month with little things that come up here and there, little repairs that you have no idea about because you're not keeping your thumb on it.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, if someone wants to learn more about all the stuff you just mentioned, or WIIRE, or each of you, how should they do that?
You can find us at womeninvestinrealestate.com, or if you're an Instagram user, it's Amelia Jo REI, Grace.investing, and WIIRE.community with 2 I's.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a good talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.